So welcome everybody. This is the July 6th meeting of the West End Civic Association Planning and Zoning Committee. And we're here to talk about a proposal for fencing at the Village, which is at 1680 Albany Avenue. So I'm Kyle Berquist, the president of the organization. And let's start by going around the room here, and I'll call on people, I guess. And then just if you could say a quick word about who you are and what your interest is. So Gallo, why don't you start?
Hi, thank you, Kyle. I'm Gallo Rodriguez. I'm the president and CEO for the Village for Families and Children. I have been with the agency for 16 years, and it's, the Village is an organization who have been around for over 200, around 210, and 100, close to 100 years in the Albany Avenue. We have multiple centers around the city, as well as in the towns around Hartford.
Great. All right, Hector.
Hi, and I am Hector Glynn. I am the COO for the Village.
Okay. Next on my screen is David Barrett.
I'm David Barrett. I live on Asylum Avenue. Interested party.
And a WECA board member. Susan.
I'm Susan Lennon. I live at the corner of Elizabeth and Oxford Street, and I'm one of the volunteers on the Architecture, History, and Resource Committee.
Very good. Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary Rickle-Pelletier. I've lived in the West End at 80 Elizabeth Street for 22 years. And I've been working on the north branch of the Park River. And I know that's your eastern boundary, and it's a real pleasure to meet you, the Village for Family and Children. So hello.
Thank you.
Mary is also a board member. Mr. iPhone. Uh-oh, you froze. There you go. Oh, you muted yourself. Try unmute.
I'm sorry, I'm having a little difficulty here. My name is Charles Teal. I'm a resident of 145 Terry Road in Hartford. And for the sake of this meeting, I'm an interested party.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
John Harding. We're going around doing introductions to John and Amy who joined late. So, John.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jonathan Harding. I'm a member of the WECA board. I am also a commissioner on the Hartford Planning and Zoning Commission, and I'm just here to listen this evening.
Thank you. And last but not least, Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Berquist. I am just an interested party, and I'm the acting chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals, so I'll be hearing this matter when it comes to our meeting, and I think it's on the August agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that's great. We've got a small group of interested people. We've got folks who you'll see down the line, Gallo, and so let's jump right into it. So why don't you go ahead?
Okay, well, I'm gonna offer you a general overview. Hector, the Chief Operating Officer, will give us any details about the project. But I wanna thank all of you for taking the time to listen our proposal. As I said it at the beginning, the Village has been in 1680 Albany Avenue for over 100 years. And really briefly, what we do over there is that there are children who come with serious trauma, serious emotional distress, and they come to the Village after they get relief from a hospital in the way going home. Then we provide a lot of services. We provide reunification services with the parents in order that the child is ready to go. to the community. Most of these children, 6 to 12 years old, they have suffered from trauma. They are very angry. Sometimes they tend to run as part of releasing their stress. And for the reason of this meeting, we have had the need to do two things. One, to increase the capacity in the campus to offer therapeutic recreational services in a kind of a larger extent that the kids can run and can release all the adrenaline. And also the safety. When children run, they run toward the Albany Avenue. It is a busy street, and there have been several, I would say, several incidents in which either the child or the staff running behind them have been close to a tragedy or to be struck by a car. Back in September last year, we have an incident close to Elizabeth Park in which one of the children was running away, followed by a staff, crossed the street, and he was struck by a car, and he was taken to the Connecticut Children's Medical Center. Unfortunately, it wasn't serious and was able to be discharged without any major issue. All of these issues make us to put closer attention to provide this safety environment for the children. And we have contemplated the need to fence the perimeters of the campus by retaining land again, they can use, or we can use, to provide therapeutic recreation as well as some sport activities for the children. Right now, it is very difficult to retain the children in the campus for a couple of reasons. We cannot lock down the facility based on the fire marshal recommendations. They don't want us to close the doors, the exit door of the houses. And also, as we have to retain them in the back of the village, of the houses, because when they get close to the street, they tend to run. When they run, staff have to leave children behind that require attention. And those are the moments in which then another child will run, another may get agitated, and it has been seriously disrupted. Last year, we recorded in the 12 months, we were able to take note of 320 running incidents of children going out. When they go out, they have been welcomed by some of the neighbors because they recognize they are children of the village, and they have offered candy, which in some way is a good gesture, but they come back, later to get more candies. But there have been other neighbors that have felt disturbed because they have knocked the door and they have come to the village for us to find solutions, which in some way is difficult to. In general, I don't know if Hector wanna offer any additional background. We can show you what is the intention. The process is for us to go in front of the Hartford Historical Preservation Commission, and we have a meeting scheduled to do so. And then the next step is planning and zoning to get the final permit. We have a sketch that we can share with you. We have two images that you probably received already. One is to show the whole perimeter in which we will be placing the fence. It's an 8-foot fence, obviously to prevent children to climbing and leaving the campus. And in the blue lines, you can see, to the left is Albany Avenue. You probably recognize the image of the Unitarian Church at the front. And then, in the back of the building, we will keep the parking outside in order that people don't have to go in and out. We will build some gates that will allow any of the fire trucks or police that sometimes are called as a 911 when the children are out of control. And we will facilitate kids and a way for them to get in. We have security also in the campus that will allow people to access the gates if they are needed. Then the other image is a rendering. Hector, if you share. Again, this is a rendering. We have an architectural firm who have offered this diagram that shows the fence with some pillars that mimic the brick of the campus in order to mitigate, the fact that we're going to fence it. As you know, the campus has been without any fence for 100 years. We like it that way, but taking into consideration the many incidents that we have with the children as well as the staff, we think that this is the best solution at this point. As a way of background, we have been asked for letters of support from the Blue Hill NRC. We have also a letter of support from the Unitarian Church. And we have requested a letter from the First Church of Christ Scientists that is in the corner of Scarborough and Albany Avenue, that it is also going through their committee for approval. Hector, you have any?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would just add, I think everyone sort of read the papers and understand that COVID has changed mental health for children across the country, and Connecticut, because we service the entire state. Connecticut is no different than that. And one of the things that has occurred is, one, the level of acuity. So right now there are so few beds that, before we would have, maybe 20 or 30% of our kids who are highly, highly acute. Now those numbers are closer to 60 to 70%. The other part that occurs is because of COVID, and we've gotten better and we're continuing to learn about it. Anytime there is a spike in the community, then and we have a staff person or a family member of one of the residents who has COVID, we have to go into COVID protocols. And that means, children wearing masks, all those precautions and pieces. On top of that, if a kid tests positive, and this is what really started to escalate our problems, was when a kid tests positives, we isolate them. And isolation means spending the majority of time in your bedroom. Now, if you can imagine being a child with, serious emotional dysregulation, being asked to stay in their bedroom for significant periods of the day, it causes greater dysregulation. And so we're always balancing emotional health versus physical health and community health across sort of the spectrum. And really last summer, we had one of those spikes, and it led to this where we had about half the population positive, the other half weren't. So we were quarantining. And that really does sort of escalate, and it really heightened the impact of the AWOL behavior. It's the one behavior that the children have learned that we really struggle to manage. Now, by regulations, we are supposed to staff four children to every one staff. For safety, we've always done 3 to 1. And so we've made the investment, we've done those pieces. And even there, you get much lower than that, then you have too many adults within the group of children. And within confined settings, when you're in, hallways or in classrooms, it just sort of compounds problems. So we're always trying to balance our ratio of staffing to allowing those sort of pieces. The other part that we've learned is that, kids, especially during COVID, they need that space. And so that's actually what we train the staff to talk about is we allow kids who are starting to dysregulate space, let them take space if it's one of their coping mechanisms. But taking space means we take greater risk of being a little distant from them. So if they decide to run, if they have a problem. But even there, that's not too much of a problem when it's one-on-one. Our staff can manage any one kid, and we do. We don't like to do it because we see it as a failure in treatment, restrain kids. And so they are trained in what we call a small child hold, in which, it basically looks like a bear hug sitting on their laps. But when 2 or 3 kids start to run, now our ratios start to break down. Staff have to make split-second decisions. Do I follow the ones into the community, or do I stay with the group that I'm with? And that's really what we started to get into, these dilemmas in which staff felt unsafe. And I was there, minutes after the child was hit. The children who had run were traumatized. The staff was traumatized. They don't do this as sort of an outwardly acting out, trying to be vicious or mean when they run from campus. It's a coping mechanism, a poor one, that they learned. And so it's a way of controlling their environment. It's a way of controlling their emotions. And so most of you probably have seen, we've erected a temporary fence. And, for any of you who live close to us, and I heard that, there's someone on Westerly Terrace, and so he may be able to attest, we have not had nearly as much incident. So we've probably gone down to 1/10, maybe even less, of kids being able to leave the campus. There are still those kids who, will find a way, and every time they find a way, then we find another way to secure that area of the fence or those areas more. And so it's a little cat and mouse game. But right now, our campus is more secure. The children are doing better. The agitation, the piece is that one piece of freedom or risk-taking behavior has been able to be eliminated. This is the last thing we wanted to do. It's a huge financial investment for the organization. And it changes who we are. I mean, we struggled. We've talked about fencing probably for 3 or 4 years because we've had some of these behaviors, not to the scale that we had last summer. And really, we always came back and said, listen, we never want a child to feel like they are enclosed, for lack of a better term, a prison. That's not who we are. We're a therapeutic environment looking to help kids heal. And we could no longer do that safely without a fence. And so that's why we are asking for a fence. We're asking for a fence that allows us to have as much green space as possible. So we can still teach that coping mechanism of taking space without, being right on top of the kids, without being able to do those pieces, so that we can program out some of our driest land, which is that land up by the Unitarian Church, which we've never been able to use. And so I think that is our request, and our request is of support from the West End Civic Association.
Yeah,
Kyle, I think you're still muted.
we will add any additional information as you guys have questions.
Yeah, sure. I see Mary has her hand up, so go ahead, Mary.
I had a question. We were away, and if I remember correctly, the city is talking about a bicycle or some kind of path around there, or am I just misread?
No, you're correct. So there
Correct.
is a bicycle. The architectural firm that we have contracted with is also the one who is sketching that out. And they have assured us that, our fencing will in no way impede the bicycle path.
And just out of curiosity, what's the name of the bicycle or the architectural firm?
It's FHA.
I have it here.
I have it, Gallo.
Is Dog Design FHI Studio. Phil Barrow is the architect that have been working with us.
Okay, so a couple of things. I must admit I'm, much more familiar with issues about the river, the other side of the campus, but I live at the corner of Elizabeth and Gerard, and we have an 8-foot fence around our modern house, and it's because the house is open to it. It has a lot of glass, and so well, I'm also trained as a designer, although I've been working on environmental issues for 20 years now. And, I would have more just, I think that there's an opportunity to make the fence a more appealing. I realize that it's sort of this traditional look to have the wrought iron, but I noticed that you curved it over by the Unitarian Church side, and that the trees, there's a line of trees that it's outside of the fence, so the fence may not be so visible from the road over time if there's a more robust line of trees around the outside edge of the fence. Those are just my observations. I could go into more detail, but those are our general observations, and it makes sense that what you're doing. From my perspective, but I do think, there's issues. It's bars, so I wonder if, like, for instance, ours is a solid fence because we're a modern house and we have 75 feet of glass. So it really has to not be visible from the street. And of course, we're on a corner. But one of the things that we did was we used it's a material that's used in cow wall, and it's basically a fiberglass, and it's a translucent material, and it allows light to go through it, and it's sheer, so somebody can't climb on it, right? It's translucent, so it's not perfectly transparent, but it allows the light and the shading of light, the light to play across it. So I think, those, whether that's less expensive than the or more expensive than the wrought iron, I'm not, that those are design questions. I know Phil Barlow is actually a landscape architect with True Design. Those are my observations. I think there's a lot of just subtle aspects of that you could just tweak and refine and contemplate, especially with respect also on the other side of the fence, how you want to activate it, whether there's a ball field back there or something like that. But anyway, but it certainly makes sense to have to be able to protect.
So what I'm hearing, Mary, is you understand the need for a fence and aren't opposed to it, have some suggestions about materials, and recommend trees between the fence and the sidewalk, essentially.
Yeah, maybe even
Is that fair?
a little bit wide. I think, although the village might be giving up land, it would be nicer to see a little bit wider strip on the public side. And I especially at the I do bicycle a lot around the corner and over to the University of Hartford, or not a lot, but some. And I think smoothing out that corner at Route 44 and what is it, 187? I forget all these numbers, but Bloomfield Avenue. If there was the same kind of curve, the same kind of curve that you've got rolling towards the Unitarian Church, if that could roll and kind of just to allow bicyclers to sort of.
Yeah, I mean, that project is more on the city's Albany Avenue side path than what we're talking about here, but
right.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think the farther away you can get bicyclers from the busy street, but again, that's a public interest rather than your
right. That's totally unrelated to fencing down the hill.
Yeah,
which is what they're proposing.
Yeah, it's just a matter of how far back to set the fence gets set back and whether what their needs are on the inside of the fence. You know, how far back to set the farther back you set the fence from the road, the less visible, the less prominent it'll be to people driving by, and the more space there'll be for a bicycle path or a public path passageways that are a little further from the cars and protect people who are walking from the cars. But again, those are public interest issues.
Definitely good, input, good recommendations. At some point when we are in final stages of design, those will be things that we can take into consideration. Anything that we do to mitigate, the impact, it's going to be something new. The people that will see it for the first time like that, that's what it is. The people who have seen it without the fence, that would be a kind of a visual impact. But anything in regard to putting plants, make it more ornamental, choosing a best material. The goal over here is that they can't climb it anyway, because we tried with 6 feet, the temporary fence, and that was a piece of cake for them, and they were able to climb that, which put a staff in disadvantage, because then they will have to go all the way around and will give the kids more time to disappear. Then all of that is welcome, Mary. I really appreciate your comments.
Yeah, I totally understand the climbing issue because when I originally moved here, I thought about covering our fence from the outside with vines.
Mary, I'm sorry, can I interrupt?
Oh, I just had a quick, but I realized having vines on the outside would allow people to climb over the fence.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the other thing that I had to say, Hector mentioned, is money is an issue, but it's not an issue over here. The board realized that they are ready to make a significant investment, and they already authorized the investment in order to keep the kids safe. The worst things that can happen is see a headline of an organization that is there to provide services to children and families to be, in the front of the newspaper saying a child under the care of the village is run by a car. And everybody felt compelled that we had to find a solution. And with that, going to be coming an investment, because we will do anything to make it effective as well as to mitigate the impact that the campus offer. It's a beautiful view, and we realize that.
Charles, let's go to you.
Thank you very much. My first question, and actually I have a couple in mind, but my first question is related to the history of this problem. And compared with my history in the city of Hartford, I've resided throughout the city of Hartford over the course of the past 67 years, but I've only lived in the area known as the West End for the past 27 years, my wife Elaine and I. But as I recall, and I could be wrong, but as I recall, this is an issue that we discussed approximately 20 years ago. At that time, I had a lot of things going on. And quite frankly, we addressed it. An attorney was hired. As a matter of fact, it was Rudy Arnold, former deputy mayor of the city of Hartford. And as I recall, he said during his presentation in the council chambers of City Hall, he said, if it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, and it sounds like a duck, it's probably a duck. And what he was simply trying to do is make the point that this is a prison. If you start taking certain steps, it starts to take on the feel of a prison. Now, I'm not going to get long-winded about this, but I just want to share this as a very important background information. My wife, Helene, and I, as I said earlier, we live on Terry Road. We see the effects of having a child, several children, leave the village and come up Terry Road, up Wesley Terrace, and it disturbs us greatly. It breaks our hearts because we know what's going on. we both went to school with a boy by the name of Dan. I know his last name, but there's no need in sharing it at this time. But he was there at the village, and he went to our school, the Mark Twain School, which is still there, but by a different name on Lime Street. So I think what I'm trying to say is I'm sympathetic to the cause, very sympathetic, and I understand and appreciate fully what has been presented on behalf of the village at this point in time. But my first question is simply this: has this issue been taken up in the past? Because it sounds very familiar.
Yeah, I can answer that question. It predated my days, but I'm very familiarized about the tension that existed at some point between the village and the neighbors and the need to go to court. We even have a piece of document in the court. It was totally unrelated. It wasn't about a fence. It was about the type of children that we were taking care of. And again, that predated me. And there is a waiver for the village because we have been there for a while for children who come from DCF, child welfare, foster care, and children with behavioral health. At that moment, what happened is that the village was trying to build a special school for children coming from the juvenile justice system. And the neighbors were opposed to juvenile justice children coming to the village. Then it wasn't related to offense, with all the respect.
I think it was
Okay.
primarily related to the construction of the school and adding the development.
Yeah. Well, it was, it was contentious, and it was related, as the document expressed, that the village have in some way grandfathered in to have the children that were originally intended to be at the village, which it used to be children in foster care ready for adoption. And at that moment, the village already was operating a program of the juvenile justice system, and the neighbors didn't like the fact that they find out that later on, and that was corrected. I had 16 years working, and I don't want to put David Barrett in the spot, but we have been building that bridge with the community. We have been very supportive in every sense of the West End Civic Association. I used to live for 8 beautiful years in Terry Road. Then I know the neighborhood, I know the culture. I attended all the dine around. It's beautiful, and we have a great relationship with the West End. That's exactly why we are here. We don't want to get by surprise friends, a community that have been a friends.
If I may, I'd like to ask a follow-up question. And I know this one is somewhat far-fetched, but to the best of my recollection, and I'm a Hartford history buff, not a historian, but a history buff. And to the best of my recollection, the history of the village goes back to an orphanage that was once on Putnam Street.
Yes,
Which
yes.
Yes, okay,
Yeah,
well,
you're totally right.
good. I hate being wrong about things like that. It bothers me terribly. But
If you see the picture I have in my office, sorry to interrupt you, about the building in Putnam Street, it looked like the Capitol,
yeah,
the state capitol. It used to be with around 300 children in orphanage. We no longer have children as orphans because the intention is short term. These children stay at the village for no longer than 6 months, sometimes get delayed for 9 months, even a year, but that's the exception, because the longer they stay there, the worse they come up to get adjusted to the community. Then it's a short-term intervention versus the orphanage that used to be for life until children were emancipated.
well, I brought up the origins of the organization to ask this question. Rather than running into these challenges, which seem to be increasing, we all know that society is changing, and unfortunately, it's not changing for the better. Do you foresee a time? Are there any plans whatsoever to move the village again?
it's not out of the question. It's something that we have explored. It's costly indeed, but yes, there is a possibility of expansion of these services because many providers, they don't feel, with the knowledge and skill required. It requires a lot of training of staff. They leave because, they're in some way get also assaulted by children. But those are children that we are committed by mission. We can't say we no longer want to serve these children. Somebody had to do the work. We really, we had great outcomes. But going back to the point, 2 years ago, we explored to buy a different facility in a different town. It was costly at that moment, but that continued lingering with the board, that possibility.
Mm-hmm. Just one last statement. I'm done. I promise you. Just one last statement. This information, particularly the information you shared with regards to how this isn't the same scenario as was the case 20 years ago. It may have been 25. I don't really recall exactly when it was, but this is a different situation. Somehow that information needs to be communicated to the residents, particularly of the West End. And unfortunately, today's setting is not an ideal one, only because of what is taking place at Elizabeth Park right now. As I was coming home, I noticed many of my neighbors were heading towards Elizabeth Park. On a Wednesday, it's a very busy day. People enjoy being there for one concert or another. And I would hate for someone to say, this was approved while we were doing something else we wanted to do. We wish we had known more, we would have spoken up, or something to that effect. So in other words, what I'm asking is it possible to make people aware through another method? I do realize that this is an acceptable method here, but unfortunately for today, it just isn't working to get as many people listening as should be listening.
Yeah, we definitely, part of the intention of the meeting today was to explain you exactly the proposal, gain your approval or support if possible, but you have your own process. Kyle had to go back and talk to the board or to the committee that will give us the letter of support. And, we have some deadlines, and I don't want to make it as an impediment. I'd rather deal with any situation up front rather than at the end. But we are looking forward for a commission meeting, Hector.
July 20th.
Huh?
The Historic Preservation Society is July 20th.
July 20. And then we have another process that the neighbors will be asked directly, not necessarily the WECA, but the neighbors that are, immediate neighbors of the village throughout the planning and zoning. They will receive a letter. They will explaining what's going to happen, and they have the time to attend to a meeting, to a hearing.
That is essential. That is essential. Thank you very much.
We won't be able to build until we have the approval of the commission, the historical commission, and the approval of planning and zoning, and neighbor input is required, especially the ones that are immediately adjacent to the village.
Thank you.
Charles, I'll also kind of answer your question, which is I am recording this meeting, so my intention is to try to make the recording available online so folks who weren't able to attend tonight can at least watch the conversation. And
if any neighbor wants to have a discussion with either me or Gallo, we will make ourselves available if they weren't able to make the meeting.
Okay.
I will
Thank
be
you very
more than
much.
happy.
Are there other questions for our guests? Robert.
Yes. Hi, Kyle. I can't figure out where the raise your hand button is on the Zoom, but I live at 1800 Albany Avenue, which is the northwest corner of Bloomfield and Albany Avenue. So my property, my yard goes along Bloomfield and up Albany. So, you know, I'm sympathetic to the village's situation, because we've had several of the children from the village, you know, go through our yard and being pursued by the staff. So this has happened any number of a few times, I should say. So I am sympathetic to that, but I do want to point out that I would just like to speak up about the aesthetics of that whole triangle, that whole area, because it's, you know, as we all know, it's got two of these fierce major roads in the Hartford area. But you know, I was at, as well as my neighbor, and I don't remember your name, but the former fire chief of Hartford. We were at the meeting with the bicycle path people a couple of weeks ago, and so what their plan is to do with that, if they get approval, is that existing sidewalk would be replaced with a 10-foot sidewalk. So it nearly doubles the size of the sidewalk. It's unclear at this time whether it would be like an asphalt kind of material or a concrete. It's a design, it's not, the design hasn't been decided yet. It's a cost issue. But I'm just want to point out that with doubling the size of that sidewalk and then this fence, I think if all that comes to pass, it's going to alter the aesthetics of that corner. And I think we should be careful of that, because many, many years ago, I don't know if you all remember the bridge that was over the Park River, but that was a beautiful bridge that was part of a movement called Cities Beautiful in the United States, and it was that program was designed to build beautiful, grand entryways into America's cities. So this bridge was quite beautiful. It was a historic bridge, in that it was, the construction of it as a poured concrete thing was kind of one of the first to do that. And I have a DOT. I was really involved in trying to prevent that from happening, because what they wanted to do was straighten out the road to increase the traffic flow or make it easier. So that bridge build, it did have a DOT inspection that said it was wide enough and it was structurally sound enough to not need replacing in the next 50 years or something like that, in their anticipated use. So, but anyway, the bridge was eventually torn down and put in with that kind of cookie cutter typical bridge. So I saw the degradation of the aesthetics of the neighborhood be seriously impacted. You know, it was a really sad moment for me to see that bridge go. And, you know, but you forget that, or people that are new don't remember that. And so then you see a fence, and the people that are new don't remember when there wasn't a fence or when there wasn't a big bicycle path. All of those things. The bicycle path is a great idea. The fence is probably a much needed structure. But in all of those discussions, I think it's important for us to keep the integrity and the beauty and the aesthetics of this, like I said, fierce corner that we live on. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Robert, we would be very sensible. Oh, sorry. No, go ahead. I will wait. Oh, yeah. No, Robert, we're very sensitive to the impact for the neighborhood. We love the campus. We maintain the campus. We invest in that land, significant amount of resources for a nonprofit organization, because we respect the community and we keep a legacy. What we are talking today, unfortunately, is about the death of a child in an organization who have been around for over 100 years in the same place. And we're gonna try to maintain the safe and the integrity of the children that we take care. But the sensitivity is there, because anything that we do over there, would be open to the best idea.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I totally understand and trust that you have those good intentions. I'm just saying that, you know, if it's this organization does this and this organization does this and DOT does this, the cumulative effect that maybe not everybody understands can have a pretty significant impact.
Yeah.
Hector, can you share the schematic for the site plan again? Because I remember from when I was over with you guys, the sidewalk is actually quite high up around the Bloomfield area.
So the current plan has us 30 feet from the sidewalk on the Albany side, and on the Bloomfield side, it increases to 90.
And if you zoom in, the contour lines are on there as well. Do you happen to know if those are like they must be 1 foot lines?
You're beyond my pay grade to read these. You and your team are probably in a better. I do know it shows the contour lines, but
Yeah, I mean, a point that Gallo had made when he was talking to some of the architectural committee people was that on the Bloomfield frontage, the setback was so great for the fence that the natural slope of the terrain would likely make the fence more or less invisible because it's set so far down the hill compared to where the street is. And I was just trying to see if the site plan showed that, which it sort of does.
I think that's true, especially on Bloomfield side. I think that's true. I mean, it'd be nice to see, I mean, since 2 Design is working on it, it'd be nice to see the layout of the bicycle trail, you know, overlaid onto this, so we see it together.
Yeah, I will ask, Hector, did you mention, because I wasn't previous to that information, that Phil Barrow is working in the, because he can help us in delineating or crossing line with the width in order that we can see the proportion in the.
yeah, and again, I will double check this, but my recollection of the conversation I had with Phil was that, you know, we'd still be 20 feet away between the bike path and the fence, the way it's currently laid out.
I have to say it'd be nice, and again, this is not the topic of the evening, but it'd be nice to see the bicycle trail moved away from the road, you know. I mean that, and
I do think it is on our side of the sidewalk where the trail is the bicycle path is supposed to go.
Yeah, because I imagine that the city will use city land. We haven't been contacted that they're gonna take portion of the land for the village, from the village for the bicycle path. You know,
I guess
things
that
that we
would
will be
be-
very amicable
Yeah,
to
they should
contemplate.
they should pay you. If they one would hope they wouldn't take it, they would.
Yeah, but I would say that if that would be the case, that they are planning to get some land from the village, they would already contacted us.
Yeah, they
But
probably don't want to pay extra, but just in terms of aesthetics, I think that they may not have thought of that because they're just, you know, going, a lot of times, you know, a line gets drawn on paper and then, you know, in a plan, and then
Yeah.
that's what gets built. And aesthetically, those are often, you know, quite, those are the lowest, you know, in terms of our own physical perception on the ground. Those types of plans that were generated from plans, you know, are often the least aesthetically desirable, because it's just lines that parallel other lines instead of really working with nature and the surrounding context. Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, there's so many issues from a design perspective to discuss, but it's, again, I guess the question is I think I'm confused of whether people are on the call are in general supportive? Like Charles's questions, where's everybody at? Do we take a straw poll? I feel very
Let's-
sympathetic of what the challenge is. And I must admit, I feel like everything is a design issue, and we can have good design or bad design. However, the process is unfold, and that there's a lots of details and work just to achieve the design. Often most of the work goes into getting people say yes or no, and then the design is kind of like me, instead of really working to refine the characteristics of the design and understanding how it looks and feels in advance of actually the construction process.
As part of the Architectural History and Resources Committee, I enjoyed the presentation in person several weeks ago. And I think all of this really comes down to a very simple thing. Are we concerned about the children's well-being or not? I think things like the width of the bicycle paths and all of that are very important. I agree with you, Mary, and everybody else. But I think when I heard what happens to these kids when they panic and they run and they can get over a fence, something needs to be done to protect them. And I think we should, as Hartford residents, be proud of the villages, their legacy, and we should be supporting them. So from my committee standpoint, at least I stand ready to support this.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Let's go back to Charles. You've had your hand up for a little bit.
With regards to the matter of design, I was the chairman of the Hartford Circus Fire Memorial Committee, the organization that built the memorial to the more than 167 people who lost their lives on July 6, 1944 during the Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus Fire. We selected, incidentally, today is the 78th anniversary of that event, coincidentally. But we selected to design for the building of that memorial. And I am here to tell you, they were incredible. I am telling you, they were incredible. If this is going to go through, and so far it appears as though, well, at least from my wife and I, our perspective, it looks like the safe thing to do, and I always look at safety first. But if you're going to use to design, you couldn't choose a better firm. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And there is I'm gonna repeat this. The board is so sensitive about the relationship with the community and the way the campus have been for so many years that we know it's gonna cost us a little bit more money to get to the right design and construction to mitigate the impact. I also appreciate, every input that you have been giving us that will continue opening our mind to get to the right place. And again, we Hector mentioned that this have been conversation at the village for almost 4 or 5 years as the increase in mental health issues and the severity of the cases come to the village. Same children's, but with less residential care, with less other alternatives, they ended up at the village, as they ended up in the Connecticut Children's Medical Hospital emergency room. We have been talking about fence for forever, and we got to the point right after an incident that fortunately didn't end up in a tragedy, but a child that went to the emergency room by the ambulance and was released in the afternoon. We don't want the other outcome.
Just so if you're interested, we have petitioned SCE to help us make Albany Avenue a school zone, since we operate a school on our campus for our residents. And so they've been working at it for a year. I don't think it'll ever come to fruition, but it's another attempt of ours to make the community a little bit safer for children.
Are there any other questions for the gentleman? Okay, so from a WECA point of view, so they've come to us asking for a letter of support for both the historic preservation application on July 20th. And then also my understanding is the Zoning Board of Appeal step, which would be August, presumably.
August 9.
It's 9. So, you know, we as a board don't have any official board meetings between now and then. So the intention was to ask the executive committee to weigh in and take a position based on the fact finding and feedback that we got from this meeting and from also the other meeting that John Rose referenced, where the architectural history folks went over and sat at the village for a little bit. So we're definitely trying to collect input and feedback and positions and priorities so that they can be reflected. And, you know, as Charles referenced earlier, it'd be great to get other people who weren't able to attend the meeting to provide feedback as well. So my intention again is to try to make this video available and circulate it so that folks who didn't realize we were having a meeting or missed it for some other reason can at least watch it and send some feedback. So, you know, I open the floor to comment on that process sort of question or issue and see where we go from there.
This is David. Why don't you just do a straw poll of the people on this call?
Yeah, we can do that too. Probably the easiest way would be to, I don't know, looks like we have a couple people on phones who maybe typing in the chat would be a little challenging. So how are folks generally feeling? Like how many people would generally be in support of a fencing project with this aesthetic or some other aesthetic? That's kind of a TBD, I guess, from their point of view. So hands. So, you know, okay. And Amy doesn't vote because she'll have the real vote later. So we won't make her cast a vote now. So there's support, which is, you know, good to see, not surprising. I think the safety factor is paramount. So, you know, I'll probably write up some brief notes that I've been taking as we've gone along so that they're available also in addition to the video. And then certainly as John noted earlier, the architectural committee, the WECA Architectural History Committee was in favor of supporting the look and feel of the brick columns with the black fence. They felt that was appropriate. On this call, there's been some other design issues or suggestions, I guess, made. I don't know where that'll all end up, but so far it seems like there is consensus that the fence is appropriate and we should be supporting it. So
yeah, I want to pass by Mary's house. Sorry, Kyle, just to see the fence over there. What is the address, Mary?
Well, the majority of the fence is kind of like hideous, but there's one piece of it that is on it's a slow boat with my husband to getting the fence my way. But there's a little piece of it on Girard. So the house is at the corner of 80 Elizabeth Street, and there's two panels. I feel like I should take I think I'll take a photograph of it and send it to Hector, because it's actually, you know, the fence it's very it's, you know, it's a 8-foot fence. It's a wooden fence. It's painted, and it's, you know, it's I mean, there's a long, if I had, if I won the lottery tomorrow, that would be one of the first things I would address a lot. But, but I feel like over time, I've realized that, I mean, the translucent panels, which are actually beautiful, and these plastics used to yellow in the sun, but now they've solved that problem. They used to yellow and get brittle. And so we put up these trial panels, and they've been up for years now, and they rinse off easily. So that there's some long-term maintenance benefits to it as well. And for us, we can have, if I manage someday to get that fencing all around our yard, the light that comes through, having the light come through is really beautiful. And you can have vines on one side or the other, but wherever you put the vines, they can climb, people can obviously climb vines. But anyway,
Thank you, Mary.
thank you. I just want to say, as much as I appreciate To Design as a designer by training, although I don't have the privilege of having the funding to do design work, doing a mock-up is absolutely critical to refining a beautiful design. And as a historian, not as a historian, but knowing a bit about history, Michelangelo, although he was a sculptor, he did beautiful architectural pieces, and the history of his work is that he would mock up parts of the projects that he would be working on. Of course, this was in Rome many years ago. But you might consider, and Florence, you might consider having a mock-up. And again, because I think, as Charles pointed out, it is also for the perception of the children, right? And how they see out, and just moving that panel back and forth in relationship to the road, and seeing how different materialities will be viewed. I mean, you only need like 8 to 12 feet. It will be very informative. And
Thank you.
Yeah.
We will communicate things too. And we have to go through the proper, approval in town to start making those design investment, because it can be costly. And we want to do it at the right time when we have the approval. But we won't escatimate to do that. We won't. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Gallo. Thank you, Hector. We appreciate you coming to the neighborhood and sharing what your ideas and proposals are. And
really nice to see all of you. Charles, David, really nice.
Thank you. Yeah, nice to meet you virtually.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Very good.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye. I will call you later, tomorrow.
All right.
Okay,
And
bye.
so that will conclude today's planning and zoning meeting. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.